joined now by an actor and singer who, for the best part of 20 years, has been touring in major musicals such as War of the Worlds, Elvis the Musical, to mention but two. But alongside that, he has found time to appear in Doctor Who. So I'd like to introduce Damien Edwards. How are you?
Hello, I'm good. How are you?
Not bad, thanks. And been making the most of the isolation. You've been working on new music?
Well, working with lots of different musicians and meeting lots of new people via Zoom. Not making much money, sadly, but it's been a very creative time, which is nice. And who knows how long it will continue? So it's just as well, really.
Yes, you have to wait and see what happens. But it was
Yeah.
like you perhaps were best known as a singer and performer. So I was interested how the supporting artist side of things came about.
Well, I started doing musical theatre in 1999. And so I got my first job and I went on tour, and it was a 5-month tour. And then it finished, and you suddenly think, oh, so I've got no way of making any money all of a sudden. And it kind of came about because of that. It was something to do in between theatre jobs, and it was before I'd really established myself as a singer who people would book to just do events and corporate work and things like that. So it kind of filled a hole, I guess, and enabled me to earn a bit of money when I wasn't doing a tour or a corporate job or whatever.
So was it quite interesting to go into, because obviously there's an overlap between television, film, and theatre, but they're two very different disciplines, being on stage as opposed to on screen.
Yeah, they really are. Theatre is very immediate. You rehearse a show for 2 or 3 weeks or however long, then you go on stage and you perform it 8 times a week, and the audience is there, and you get an immediate reaction. Of course, and with film and television, it's entirely different. You, especially doing essay work, you spend a lot of time doing nothing really, reading a book or watching. Well, now you'd be watching something on your iPad or your laptop or whatever, and then you go on set. There's a burst of activity, then you go off set again, wait around for another few hours. It's entirely different, yeah. Which I didn't really, before I did a little essay work, I hadn't really done that much work in front of camera, so it was initially a learning experience, and then I kind of quickly learned that it was quite sort of draining, long days on set, and the glamour of film and television quickly dissipated and the reality sunk in.
Yes, I know what you mean, but it must have been a great way to learn from, or at least observe, some very experienced actors on set.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it was a realization that it was an entirely different discipline to theatre. If you're doing a musical or a play, you're that character for 2 hours a night. Whereas with film and television, you shoot a scene and then you're off again for God knows how long. You go on, shoot another scene. They're often out of order. I mean, it's a different process entirely, and your brain has to be in a completely different space. And and I'd always kind of thought that maybe I would have some kind of a career in television, but yeah, I think I'm a much. It so happens that I'm a much better singer than I am an actor. So most of my work has continued to be in musicals and singing-based activities. Yeah, which I'm fine with. I've come to terms with it.
So by the time Doctor Who came along, you'd been a supporting artist for quite a while by that point. Was
Hmm.
it a particularly exciting show to work on? Because there must have been something of a buzz, as it was, almost at its height there when it came back.
It was firstly, it was incredible how popular it was, because actually I remember the first episode I did was David Tennant's first episode, and I forgot that when we were talking earlier, but that's the very first one I did, and I was just. That really was a sort of extra job. I think I was just part of a crowd, and we just stood on a roof or something. But to see his debut as Doctor Who was quite something, and he continues to be my favourite Doctor, and to be part of that history, no matter how small, is quite something. I think. I mean, it's and occasionally I see an episode that I'm in, and I'm like, oh yeah, look at me on Doctor Who. It's great. I mean, and it's a great show as well. I think the BBC have done a really good job of reinventing it and bringing it back for an entirely new audience, and keeping it alive and somewhat relevant. Yeah.
I suppose that is the joy of the series, and reinvention is built into its very nature. But a story I suppose you must have had quite a lot to do with was still with David Tennant, the Lazarus experiment in the Welsh Assembly, which must have been a lot of long and busy night shoots.
It was. I think, from what I can remember, I was on set for like 4 nights on the trot. And it was very long and there's nothing natural about doing a night shoot. It's you're fighting sleep constantly, and if you're an SA, you're kind of waiting around a lot, and often the places where they have you waiting are just like, there's the floor, that's where you are for the next 7 hours, and then you still have to kind of wake up and turn it on, I guess, whenever you're called to set to do whatever you're going to be doing, which is often milling around. I think I was a party guest. I had a kind of an ill-fitting tuxedo on, and I somehow managed to dye my hair blonde at the time, and it looked kind of weird, and it was a funny time. But anyway, yeah. Good show though. Mark Gatiss was there, I believe, and he was great, and David Tennant was always fantastic, and it was always a joy to watch them work, even if the reality of being an SA is it's often quite dull, but still it's still great to watch. Pros.
So for that story, the sort of monster was a CGI creature that terrorizes everybody. As a supporting artist, are you given much background as to what you're running away from, or is it just there is something chasing you, sort of thing?
I think we got shown a picture of it, I think, but it was mainly certainly the scenes that I was involved in. It was mainly reaction shots and reacting to nothing really, except maybe some flashing lights and what have you, and then everything else was CGI'd in afterwards. So just lots of. There you go. See, that's why I'm a singer.
But it wasn't just sort of background work. You also had featured parts, odd lines here and there as well. So it must be quite nice to get those almost parts rather than just being in the background.
Yeah. No, that was. I kind of decided after a little while that I couldn't do the SA work anymore. It was just, I just found it quite unfulfilling, I guess, and so I ended up just doing walk-ons and things like that, which was a little more money, but the main thing was you were kind of you were there to do a specific thing. So I did turn left with the where I was a cab driver, and I had to drive a cab, and I had a line, and I was only on set for a couple of hours, and it also feels more like you're doing what you wanted to do in the first place, which was act. So I found driving the cab really difficult, and you've got to hit a mark which you can't really see because the cab is huge, and so you're just hoping for the best, really. I hope I don't ruin this shot by crashing this cab into the back of that truck or whatever. So you drive the cab, you lean out the window, you say your line, and that's it, and it's over in a matter of seconds. But the anxiety of driving a cab. And also I had to drive a police car in the, I did an episode of the Sarah Jane Adventures as well, and I had to drive a police car in that, which was equally stressful. But,
Yeah, because the Sarah Jane episode as a policeman, it's a lovely little moment where the policemen drive up and you're accosted by a Judoon, and then you flee. I mean, it was a great little scene. That must be lovely when you actually get on set to see what the setup is. That there's quite a lot going on there.
Yeah, I mean, of course, these things often take place on sort of back streets, and they'd found a sort of back street somewhere around Cardiff Bay, and it didn't look like much while we were filming, but actually, of course, when you see the finished scene, it's really nicely put together. But the best thing about that scene was being confronted by an actual Judoon. It wasn't CGI or anything. It was a guy in a suit. It was fantastic, and I got to be accosted by a Judoon and immediately run away. And I had that was a lovely show, Sarah Jane Adventures. It was I really loved that she got to come back as Sarah Jane and got to play that part for, how many series did they do? Was it 5 or something? I can't remember. But and she was a lovely lady as well. I was really pleased to be part of that. Yeah.
So did it feel like the same show to Doctor Who? Because there's a lot of similar people behind the scenes, but did it have that same atmosphere on set?
Not entirely. It felt like, I think the budget was somewhat reduced, and it actually felt a lot more like, well, that scene with the Judoon, it felt a lot more like sort of guerrilla filmmaking. I know it wasn't. I'm sure they had permits and everything, but but it felt like it was shot on the fly a bit, and it was really good. It was a good experience doing that episode. Yeah, definitely. And I guess because the budget was probably smaller, then the shooting was a lot more intimate, and there weren't crowds of extras. It was quite a small scene, and it was really good. I have fond memories from about 10 years ago, or whenever it was. I can't remember. No, more than that, probably. Oh God, I'm so old.
But what there always are when you're filming in Wales is crowds of fans and onlookers for the filming. So even as a supporting artist, that must be quite odd that you've got an audience in front of you through all of this. Yeah.
Do you know what was? You reminded me that I was in the fires of Pompeii. Is that right? So the scene that I was in for that was filmed on a Welsh mountainside in the pouring rain, freezing cold, and the strangest thing about it was not shooting the scene itself, but turning up to set, which was in the middle of nowhere, and there was a cordon, and there were fans standing in the rain waiting to meet David, who wasn't even shooting that day anyway. And it was literally we were there just to film this scene of priests. I was playing a Vulcan priest, and they were just there in the rain for hours and hours, bless them, and they were all really cheerful and happy to be there, and it was extraordinary because I was like, it's raining, I don't want to be out in the rain, it's miserable. But it's just the love that the series generates, I think. Anytime there was a location shoot, there would always be fans. And actually, after doing Doctor Who, I would get sent cards and also, Doctor Who cards, collectible things to sign and send to people. I was like, how do you even know who I am? It was extraordinary. It's a unique piece of television history, Doctor Who, I think, and I think to be part of that is really nice. No matter how small or terrible I was.
But I suppose that must be unique to Doctor Who. Other shows that you work on as a supporting artist, I can't imagine you get that same interest.
No, it's like being part of Star Trek in the States, I suppose. It's a similar sort of thing. There are very few television shows, I think, that traverse the decades, and I think Doctor Who is almost unique in this country. I suppose if they brought back something like Blake's Seven or something, maybe, but no. Doctor Who's just been around, since the dawn of television, and it continues to be around, and it's quite something, really. And it is nice to be a part of it, a part of its history. It's nice to be part of this documentary. Thank you for asking. As he cuts all my interview and puts it in the bin.
Well, no, it's great to talk to you about some of the stories that, and get a unique angle on some of these things. Because you also worked on Matt Smith's first story as well. Would you have had anything to do with him on that? Or?
No, well, it's funny because I didn't really know him, and I didn't know Rory or who's the other? Oh, Amy Pond, of course. God. So I think I met them both, and just was just say hello to, and they were all really lovely, and they were all embarking on this huge new phase of their careers. I mean, and you just don't know, I suppose. I mean now, Karen is in Guardians of the Galaxy and things like that, and it's incredible, She's but back then they were all just kind of starting out, really. Even Matt Smith, I suppose. And I was in his first episode for about 5 seconds or something. And it was supposed to be the height of summer, I think, and in reality it was a drizzly day in Wales, and it was raining, and we were all dressed in kind of summer clothes, and I had some really weird summer clothes, and I was like, who dresses like this? Apparently I do. But it was nice to be there for the start of David's tenure, and it was nice to be there for the start of Matt's, I suppose. And that was the last episode I did. Yeah. And then I moved on. Or they never booked me again. No, I just decided I decided I didn't want to do any more essay work. I just wanted to do walk-ons and things, and so the work diminishes a lot when you decide that. But the work that you do get is more fulfilling. So it was a good decision, I think, on my part. Yes.
So by that point, was the sort of musical theatre starting to take off for you?
Well, no, I mean, the musical theatre had always been a kind of constant. But the thing is, you finish one tour and then I think from 1999 through to 2005, I was working. I did pretty much 2 tours a year, and those tours would last about 4 months each. But then there's still 4 months where you don't have any work, so then you got to fill it with other things. And then I had a few quiet years where I probably did more essay work and more sort of television-y stuff. And then other work started to come in, and as a singer and a performer, and that would then occupy X amount of time. So it's funny being in this business because you can't really ever say that you're one thing. So I could say that I'm a musical theatre performer, but I haven't done an actual musical for about 5 years. But I've done musical tours as a singer, and during lockdown, actually, I just agreed to be the singer in a rock band that's got a record deal, and that we're recording their 3rd album at the moment. So. Yeah, you never know what's happening, what's going to happen, what's in the future. It's kind of exciting in some ways, but it's a bit nerve-wracking when you've got a mortgage or you've got rent to pay.
Yeah, but I suppose one of those musical tours that you worked on was War of the Worlds, which is an infamous production that I think many watching will know. When you go into something like that, that must be quite nerve-wracking, knowing that it has such a reputation.
Yeah, well, I did it in 2009, I think, and I joined the tour. It was a 22-date tour, and it was arenas all around this country, and then it was 4 nights in Amsterdam and 2 nights in Germany. I can't remember what the venue was in Germany. And I joined halfway through because the guy who was playing Parson Nathaniel, he was Australian, and he had to go back home to Australia because a number of his family members had become ill, and he just couldn't stay because, well, for obvious reasons. So I took over from him as Parson Nathaniel, and I did, I think, 10 dates of the 22 dates. So it was weird to kind of be sort of thrown into it almost. I think the first night I went on was in Cardiff, funnily enough, at the arena. And I did 2 nights in Cardiff, 2 nights in Brighton, 4 nights in Amsterdam, and then 2 nights in Germany, I think. Yeah, it was extraordinary. I mean, yeah, you're right. It's everyone who's a fan of that album is a real fan of that album, and everyone's got an opinion on how you should perform the song or whatever. I think Russell Watson had done it before me, and he's obviously very operatic, and I'm not really like that. But I just did the best I could, really, and it was an amazing experience, like playing in front of 15,000 people a night, something like that. But before you know it, it's done, and I remember finishing War of the Worlds in Germany, getting on a plane the following morning, flying back to the UK, and that evening I was in a gazebo somewhere in the middle of a field with a band, and people just kept coming up to us and saying, "Can you turn it down? Can you turn it down?" And the night before, I'd been in an arena in Germany playing in front of like 11,000 people or something, and they were all like, "Wow!" And then it was like, "Shut up, shut up." So it was a real kind of, that's the business in a nutshell, really. 1 minute you're there, and then you're there, and then most of the time you're somewhere in the middle, Yeah.
That is the joy of the industry, and it must be quite nice because when you're going out on tour, you're not working on your own music, but to know that in between that you can pick up and do what you want, to have the best of both worlds, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, and the only problem arises is when you've kind of committed to one thing and then another opportunity comes in and it's a better opportunity and it's you know, maybe it's more money and it's more exposure and but you know, that's the way it is for everyone. You know, everyone in this business will have huge periods of time where they hardly work at all, and then they'll have periods of time where there's too much work and they can't possibly do it all, and that's just the way it is. I think, you know, you have to make the choice and live with it and try and make the most of it and try not to think about the opportunity that you might be missing. And you know, yeah, I think I've done all right though. I'm quite happy with a lot of decisions I've made.
And obviously working across, you know, a number of genres of music as well, because you mentioned earlier working with a new band at the moment, which I imagine is probably very different to the music that you actually hear on your website. So it must be quite nice to be across so much.
Yeah, it's the thing that the originals band that I'm doing, that we're recording the album for, is it's very well, actually the music's quite theatrical, so it kind of suits me in a way. It's kind of a cross between Queen and the Electric Light Orchestra, and you can hear their influences when on each track. It's like, oh, so this is the Queen track, that's an Electric Light Orchestra track, that's a, you know, Styx track. I don't know if kids in the UK will know who Styx are, but they're an American band. And it's a man band as well. It's full of people even older than me, so you know, I get to be like the young one at age 50. But there you go. But but every time you say yes to a job, it's something different. So there's always a lot of variety. I've played Elvis in my time, which I know seems ridiculous, but it's true. I've played Roy Orbison. I've done 70s shows. I did Tommy, which is a musical based on the music of The Who. War of the Worlds, obviously, and last year I did Aliash and Jeanette's tour they're on Strictly and they do a dance tour, and I was one of the singers on that show last year. And this year I was doing Johnny Walker's Sounds of the 70s tour, which was obviously a lot of 70s music, but obviously then Corona came along and the bottom fell out of the entertainment business. Not forever, hopefully.
No, hopefully not forever. But you know, when you're, you know, recreating incredibly well-known songs, you know, Elvis, Tommy from The Who, you know,
yeah.
How do you approach that? Do you try and make it your own, or is there a sense that people have come to see a show about Elvis, so it's got to be as spot on as Elvis as you can?
Yeah, well, with like Elvis or Roy Orbison, you have to kind of, well, some people are impersonators, and they will do if they're good, they'll do a spot on, you know, impersonation. Whereas I never saw myself as an impersonator. I'd kind of try and infuse parts of their vocal style into my own, I guess, and it would be a hybrid of sound, but mainly just trying to put the song across as effectively as possible. That was always what was most important to me. I'm sorry that I don't have a photo to show you of my Elvis outfits that they used to get me to wear, but I didn't really look like Elvis at all, to be honest with you. It was just like, I looked a bit like the old Planet of the Apes movies with Roddy McDowall, and well, I had a wig on that kind of resembled the hair pieces they would wear in that, and it was a bit like that, for better or worse. But it was a great show, and the music was amazing, the band was amazing, and people were just there to have a good time, really, and they did, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Oh no, sure they did. And so, have you any idea when what you're working on at the moment will come out, or what you've worked on earlier this year?
Well, the Sounds of the 70s show is supposed to go out next year to kind of do all the dates that it didn't get to do this year. But you know, until we know what's happening with Corona, I don't know. I mean, it's like when are the theatres going to reopen is the big question, I guess. I was thinking maybe they might try and reopen them for Panto and things like that, but apparently that's not a thing. And the band, the album is coming out, I think, in November. Yeah, and that band is called Cats in Space, which is a kind of it's apt considering I was in Doctor Who for a bit, but it's just very it's glamorous rock, I think, is a good way to describe it. Yeah, hopefully in November that's coming out, so we'll see.
Oh, brilliant. Well, I think on the note of things to come and things to look out for, I'd just like to say thank you very much for your time, Damien. It's been lovely to talk to you, I think, about a very unique take on the industry. So thank you very much.
You're more than welcome, Alex. Nice to meet you.